recently that is finally solved. You see, every night for the past several years, after I lay down in bed in my 1700 single-piece pajama suit and my nightcap with the fuzzy pom-pom on top, I have trouble falling asleep because I'm plagued by the thought, what if the big tech corporations that essentially control our lives, what if they are not fully owned by the CIA? God forbid they have some tiny modicum of independence in which they don't just fawn over every air bubble that excretes out of the bodily orifices of the monster that is the Central Intelligence Agency. That's my worry every night, as I'm sure it was also the worry of every one of you. Well, the answer is finally here. We no longer have to fret that the tech giants are free from impenetrable CIA and military influence. In a story that has received essentially a TV news blackout, the CIA has awarded a secret multi-billion-dollar cloud contract to 5 companies: Amazon Web Services, Microsoft, Google, Oracle, and IBM. Meaning, those companies are now indebted to the CIA to the tune of billions of dollars. Meaning, in case this isn't sinking in yet, that they would never do something that might even slightly annoy the CIA because it would threaten the billions of dollars gravy train that they have coming their way. And I mean literally coming. The CIA is skeeting billions of dollars at the big tech giants. Which begs the question, why is it called a gravy train? That sounds pretty fucking naughty, doesn't it? Sounds pretty naughty. But considering this latest deal represents the dirtiest, nastiest, most corrupt between the sheets behavior by our ruling elite, I think gravy train fits quite well. Of course, this money completely influences these companies. Hell, I'm extra nice to my douchebag brother-in-law when he loaned me $50. Now imagine someone gave you $20 billion. Do you think you might grease his knob a little? I don't know what that means either, but it sounds connected to the gravy train thing. These contracts serve multiple purposes. They allow the CIA to have access to some of the most advanced systems in the world and also have a large degree of control over these hilariously, monstrously powerful corporations. The corporations, in turn, don't just get the billions of dollars for the services. They also get even more protection from the U.S. government, which, meaning U.S. provides the protection. And in case you forgot, the largest military in the world is the U.S. government. If Google and Amazon and IBM run the cloud computing for the CIA or other government agencies, then you can bet your ass cheeks the U.S. isn't going to let anything happen to those companies. And let's keep in mind, the CIA made a choice to spread out their corruption so that they could have all of these corporations under their oily, fat thumb. This multi-award approach opened the doors for other cloud service providers like Google, Microsoft, Oracle, and IBM to join Amazon in serving intelligence agencies. But here's something else you won't hear from the few articles willing to cover this story. This is not a fluke or a mistake. They didn't accidentally overstep the bounds of how our government works. This is the standard operating procedure of late-stage capitalism. A few corporations become breathtakingly powerful. They are then inextricably linked to the government, like two bugs making whoopee. The corporations own most of the lawmakers, who then make sure to funnel billions, if not trillions, of dollars to these companies. That is the system. That is the game. We can't act surprised when a capitalist system does exactly what it will always do. It's like putting a mouse in a cage with a boa constrictor and then being flabbergasted when the snake dines out on the mouse. I thought they'd be besties. I didn't know that would happen. This is how it works. And no one who is allowed on your mainstream airwaves Not Republicans, not Democrats, not liberal news anchors. No one in the mainstream will address how royally fucked this is. I think we're the mouse.
I don't know what to believe anymore. I spent the week just as a normal consumer. I tried to stay away from the news, but I heard people, my wife, every once in a while, she would check social media, which I didn't do. And every once in a while, I'd hear her go, oh my, what? What? No, nothing. You don't want to know. What? So I just lived life as a normal consumer of news last week. And I have to tell you, my view has really changed. I don't know who to believe anymore. I don't know what to believe anymore. I will tell you that I just don't think that I'm not going to spend 4 years saying he's an illegitimate president. But I strongly recommend that Donald Trump does everything he can right now to investigate, because the minute those electors are seated, it's over. They're not going to look into it another day. No one will. But I just don't believe he got 15 million more votes than Barack Obama did in 2008. I just don't believe it. And there's too many weird things that are going on. You heard about McInerney, right?
Yeah, this is crazy. General Thomas McInerney, one of the generals that we heard from during the second Iraq War, is saying not only did Special Operations Forces seize servers in Frankfurt, Germany, which is supposedly debunked, and it's a crazy conspiracy theory that Snopes says did not happen. He says, this is a former general, a lieutenant general in the U.S. Army.
Yeah, and I think he was the guy giving us the daily briefings.
Seems like he was, yeah.
Yeah, wasn't he?
Yeah, and he's not only did it happen, according to Thomas McInerney, but there were casualties on behalf of U.S. Special Forces.
Oh, wait.
It's a CIA facility, okay? So CIA was defending it, and U.S. Special Forces was attacking it. And he says, my initial report is that U.S. soldiers were killed in that operation. Now, that was a CIA operation, so that's a very worrisome thing. Yeah.
No, wait. It was a Pentagon operation against a CIA operation.
Yeah.
I have to tell you something.
That is worrisome.
This country does need a great reset in this way. We should shut down the CIA and all of this stuff. We should shut down the State Department. Fire them all. Start all over again. Fire everybody.
That would be a great reset.
It would be a great reset.
Really would.
I just think that this government is so out of control, it just needs to be fumigated.
Well, now, who do you believe? I think Thomas McInerney is a pretty legitimate and credible source.
And you know that these guys, they know. When you're coming out and you have a great reputation, and because I remember him being old, he's probably late 60s, early 70s. Has to be by now. Mm-hmm. So he's got a great reputation. He knows if he says this, he knows what the press is going to say. His name is mud from here on out. Why would he say something like that?
Looks like he's 83, by the way.
Wow.
So why would he say something like that?
I mean, I guess he believes it, right? I don't know, but I mean, he hasn't provided any evidence. We'd have to obviously see evidence.
Correct.
Of it. But there's obviously a lot of smart generals that we respect that are saying that this isn't happening as well. But I'd like to know what his evidence is. If he's got evidence of this happening, and as you point out, Pat, American soldiers dying
at the hands of other Americans,
right? Like, I mean, this
just
is
in a different department,
right? See, this is where it doesn't make sense to me, because Donald Trump's the president; he would know. Why wouldn't he come out and say that?
I think that's a good critique of it. I mean, again, that doesn't mean anytime someone who is serious makes a legitimate claim like this, you want to take it seriously. But as we would, the same way we would want lots of evidence on, Kavanaugh being, accused of sexual assault, We would want evidence of these things. That's all.
I will
think
say
that's a fair standard for that we hold up. By the way, for everybody.
His legal team was saying that the servers were seized, right? His former legal team, anyway.
Yes.
Sidney Powell was saying that the servers were seized.
I don't know what you guys.
Yeah.
I don't know what you guys think about the Sidney Powell thing, but I think that was a strategic move.
To get rid of, to push her off.
To push her off, because that way they could let her do their own thing. They don't have to answer for her. They're not tied together. She can raise money separately from the campaign.
Say what she wants.
She can say what she wants. She can do what she wants. And
they haven't been very pleasant to her, but I mean, that's possibly part of it. The other part of this, to that end, that we discussed a little bit last week, is that one of the issues they've had in all these lawsuits that they've been trying to file is standing. Like because people are saying, well,
that's what the president was complaining about,
right? Yeah. Like they don't have standing in all these cases, and so maybe she could have standing in another way because it's not tied to the campaign.
How could Donald Trump not have standing when he's the one who has been fraudulently removed from office, supposedly? I would say that gives him some standing.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that's just like legal wrangling, right? Like but I don't know. Who knows at this point? They have been. It didn't need, if they were going to do it for strategic reasons, they didn't need to be rude to her, which it seems like. I mean, it seems like Giuliani and her definitely had a falling out of some sort. I don't know. Maybe I read that wrong.
But I will tell you that we're going to get into the update on all the election stuff that's coming up. We have that update in about 15 or 20 minutes. But here's where I think America is on this. At least half of America. Half of America believes that something was up. Whether it was so bad and so big that it fraudulently made Joe Biden the winner or not, I'm not sure that anybody is really sure of it. People will have their gut and they'll go I just don't believe it. I don't believe it. But here's the difference. When the left doesn't believe it, they will spend the next 4 years smearing and delegitimizing. I believe that the right is in this place right now where they want to know, because we can't let this happen to us. If it was fraudulent, the American people, left and right, need to know.
And that's all you would hear from the left if this shoe was on the other foot.
Oh yeah.
That's all you would hear from them.
But here's the key. I think that the average American will say to Donald Trump, if he brought it to the Supreme Court, they're going to think, one, John Roberts. It doesn't matter if the whole case is just the Constitution written in its exact form, and all that John Roberts has to do is go, yep, that's the Constitution. He won't do it.
He would, guys, on that one, he would side with the liberals.
Yeah.
Yes. What a surprise.
Wow, really?
So I don't think that the Supreme Court will overturn an election unless it's really compelling. With that being said, I think people on the right are much more likely to say, you know what, I don't know if that would even be good, because the left will burn the cities to the ground, and there's an absolute probability of civil war.
Oh my God! It's like if all the Sidney Powell stuff, word for word, was completely true. Let's just go down that road for a second.
And she proved it positively.
And she proved it without a shadow of a doubt. I would want to know it, right?
Yeah,
because I care about the system and the truth, right?
Right.
However, we don't have a country.
Yeah.
Like our country is completely destroyed. Not even from just the left. Of course,
you can't not do it because of that.
But also, if it is possible to flip, millions of votes like that, there's no point in even having elections. Our entire system is a joke.
Right.
We are as bad as Venezuela or any other place. We basically, the entire American experiment is over at that point.
That's why it would have to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. It would have to be so clear
to everyone.
But then I think that at least the right would say, we have to do this, or we don't have a country. Right. We don't have a country. So we'd have to flip this. Otherwise, it's over. It doesn't matter anymore.
Truth matters.
Yeah.
It's supposed to matter, at least. I think it matters to some percentage of the population.
But
it's lower than I thought it was, but it's some percentage.
I think if it's not clear cut, I think a lot of people on the right, far more than people on the left would be, would say we can't. Let's not throw out millions of votes that we're just kind of think or our gut says. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we care much more about the institutions here.
Yeah, we care about our country. We know we're at the end of our country if these things happen. It has to be a compelling case.
of information within government. A new report by Open Democracy describes a so-called Orwellian unit called the Clearinghouse that obstructs media requests and even blacklists journalists.
Clearinghouse shares with a range of Whitehall departments a daily update containing the names of journalists and campaigners, the requests they have submitted, and advice on how referring departments should respond.
Passed in the year 2000, the Freedom of Information Act was meant to open up the workings of government. Requests for information were supposed to remain anonymous or applicant blind, and in theory could help keep the authorities in check. But according to this report, the Cabinet now rejects more requests than ever.
The government was trying to keep it under wraps that this unit existed, and investigation has led to the conclusion that it does exist. And obviously there are lots of questions to be asked about what it's supposed to be doing and why it was set up. The Freedom of Information Act was passed 20 years ago. And in theory, when people make applications for information from the government, it's supposed to be neutral who's applying. They're not supposed to care who's asking for it. But what this unit is doing is it's collating all of the requests, and the ones which are serious, the ones which are going to uncover potentially government malfeasance, are being referred to this unit, which has been kept secret. And it's actually in the Cabinet Office, being run by Michael Gove, who's actually got aspirations to being Prime Minister, as we all know.
Number 10 says the consideration of FOI requests remains applicant and motive blind, and the clearinghouse unit remains fully compliant. But there is growing criticism within Westminster. Labour peer Lord Clerk of Windermere was instrumental in the Act becoming law and is now calling for a government investigation into the controversial unit, along with politicians across the spectrum.
This clearinghouse is certainly against the spirit of that Act, and probably the letter too. Ministers should explain to the House of Commons precisely why they continue with this setup in view of the fact that it is contradictory to the whole purpose of freedom of information.
This is extremely troubling. If the Cabinet Office is interfering in FOI requests and seeking to work around the requirements of the Act by blacklisting journalists, it is a grave threat to our values and transparency in our democracy.
Yet this storm over the law has been brewing since it was passed 20 years ago under Tony Blair's government, after the then Prime Minister discovered that governments couldn't discuss any issues with a reasonable level of confidentiality, and freedom of information was mainly used by journalists. He cursed himself.
You idiot, you naive, foolish, irresponsible nincompoop. There is really no description of stupidity, no matter how vivid, that is adequate. I quake at the imbecility of it. For political leaders, it's like saying to someone who's hitting you over the head with a stick, hey, try this instead, and handing them a mallet.
Now it seems Boris Johnson's government is also trying to put the lid back on a Pandora's box that the British public are legally entitled to open. Kate Partridge, RT, London.
Election fraud. Two words you would never associate with the United States of America, now a phrase that could send fists flying in the country. Allegations of cheating have also outgrown the issue of a vote recount, as some Republicans claim they've been conned elsewhere too, on social media.
You know, the people that I hear from, of course, believe that conservatives were wrongfully being silenced, while those on the left that were given basically free reign of your platforms. And one of the points of contention that is often brought up is that you do recruit heavily from California, which leads to your employee base skewing quite heavily to the left.
At first glance, the allegations that Facebook's non-partisan algorithms have been tweaked to give Biden an upper hand don't seem to hold. After all, Biden and his team have been rather unflattering towards the platform, to say the least.
I've never been a big fan of Facebook, as you probably know. I've never been a big Zuckerberg fan.
But the latest reports suggest that this could all be smoke and mirrors, and that Facebook is already buttering up the new White House landlord. From promoting content which rubber stamps Joe Biden's talking points to secretly screwing tight the traffic for publications by non-mainstream and pro-Republican outlets.
It resulted in a spike in visibility for big mainstream publishers like CNN, The New York Times, and National Public Radio, while posts from highly engaged hyper-partisan pages, such as Breitbart and Occupy Democrats, became less visible.
Facebook denies any bias, explaining it strives to achieve balance to the best of its ability. But some actions speak louder, suggesting a mutual affection. The supposedly Facebook-loathing Joe Biden doesn't seem to have a problem hiring from their roster. Biden's deputy communications director also seems to have had a change of heart and deleted tweets giving Facebook a dressing down.
Big tech controls the information in this country. They control who sees what. They censored conservative news. Big tech has been working towards this for 4 years, and they've been working forward to ensure that Joe Biden wins. Their party is the Democrat Party. And so, of course, Joe Biden is going to be stacking his transition team with members of the Silicon Valley cabal. So, of course, you're going to see former CEOs from Facebook, from other technology companies. These are Joe Biden's people. Big tech is for the Democrats. And look what we've got coming up now. We've got 4 years of the media, which is going to be puppy dogs. We will not hear a peep. Nothing to criticize here. We're already gearing up in this country for a return to the swamp, as we call it, a return to normalcy, a return to warmongering, a return to big pharma, a return to all these industries that love the Democrats, that love globalization, and they got their man in with Joe Biden.
Previously, Facebook has repeatedly found itself in hot water with the US authorities. It seems this time the giant has finally learned its lesson and is preemptively raising the hand that could very soon be feeding it.
Understand why making me feel like I have to take this vaccination when I'm going to survive regardless.
Yes, because you might pass it on to people who don't.
But if they've had the vaccination, then James, then surely they'll be fine.
Well, how do they know unless everybody has it?
But what's the problem if they've had it?
There's no problem, mate. You're just not allowed in the pub. That's all.
But why not? I don't understand why I'm being ostracised for not wanting something that's only been tested for 3 months, 4 months.
You're not. You're just not being allowed into places where you might give coronavirus to people.
I mean, ostracised. But if they've had the vaccine, then why am I not allowed in?
Well, because they've had the vaccine and you haven't.
Yeah, but if they're vaccinated, then they don't have to worry then, do they, James?
No, but you're not allowed into the pub because you haven't had the vaccine. Because if they let you in, Kyle, they'll have to let everybody else who hasn't had the vaccine in as well, and you'll all infect each other.
Yeah, but I'm perfectly.
Okay, let me put it this way: it's to protect people who aren't clever enough to protect themselves. So you'd be in the pub without the vaccine, and under your rules, there'd be some. If you stop talking, I'll explain your misunderstanding, Kyle, and with great gratitude, actually, for the opportunity to explain this to people like you. If you're allowed into the pub without a vaccine, then so is him, and so is he, and so is he, and so is her, and so is she, and you could all infect each other. You see.
Yeah,
and then you'd all need treatment, and some of you would be intubated, and some of you would go into intensive care, and some of you would die. So it's to protect people who aren't clever enough to understand how they can protect themselves.
That's 0.5% of us.
Where are you getting that number from, Kyle?
Not because there's 99.5% survival rate.
Yes, but where are you getting that number from?
Where are you getting the death rate from, James?
I haven't mentioned the death rate.
No, but I'm getting the same.
Where from, Kyle?
You're getting from. I'm getting it from when I'm doing my research online.
Yes, but where, mate? Because you can't say I'm getting it from the internet, can you? You can buy moon cheese on the internet. Where exactly are you getting this 99.5% survival rate?
Because it's a fact that is a 99.5%
doesn't become a fact when you keep saying it. Just refer me to the source.
Where's your what is it that this virus is 90% successful?
I haven't said that. I haven't used any numbers yet on the Kyle, I haven't said a number yet on the programme today. So let's just concentrate on where you're getting your facts from.
From the research that I'm doing, James.
Yes, research where? Into what?
I can't take the phone away from my ear, but to go on to the articles that I've read.
Well, just name. No, you must have gone, oh, crikey, that looks good. That's come from Harvard. Or, blimey, that's from the Office of National Statistics. Or that's from the World Health Organization.
I'll say it's from the World Health. I can't pinpoint where I've got my...
And that is why, Kyle, we need to protect you from yourself, you see, which is what a vaccine would do. So you can stay at home if you want, doing your research, but if you want to move into a public space where you might infect other people, I'm afraid you'll be prevented from doing so. Do you understand why now?
But I can go out and mix with the public and do what I want. And be fine with the 99.5% survival rate.
But you keep saying this number. You keep saying, what if I said now it's got a 100% death rate? And you said, where are you getting that number from? And I said, my research. I'm getting it from my research. No, only the people that have had it. Well, that's all a conspiracy, you see, Kyle, because I saw it on Facebook, and there are a lot of people who are actually dead who are still walking around.
Is there?
Yes. I researched it on the internet. They're like zombies, and because they've got these chips in them, Bill Gates is controlling them with a PlayStation 4 controller. Seriously. Just have the vaccine, man.
Could it help the shift back towards normality?
It might, but I would like to be a little bit prudent about that. There are encouraging signs from experiments done in China and South Korea where they used information technology to certify people who are apparently illness-free, and that has been in use for quite a long time, and it has proved not to be controversial. So this could be useful. Initially, it won't really be of any use as such until a significant number of people are vaccinated, bearing in mind that they will probably need 2 vaccinations and that a single vaccination really won't demonstrate anything until the second one has been given. The second thing to bear in mind on that is whether the vaccinations really are effective. Although there have been tests and trials with them, we won't know their full effectiveness until we have a large statistical batch to analyze on that and see whether they really are 94, 95% effective or significantly less than that. What we don't want is someone who has been vaccinated to then become a super spreader among those who haven't been vaccinated.
Indeed. A little bit further down the line, though, could this result, as in the COVID passes, in a 2-tiered system for those vaccinated and those not?
Well, there may be some social tension over all of this, and there may be some strong arguments against doing this, and it may be regarded by some as discriminatory, but it is really a gigantic experiment to see whether this sort of thing is likely to work at all. And I honestly don't quite know the answer to that because there isn't much in the way of precedent about this. Despite the fact that we have had pandemics before and we have had major diseases, but they were in a time long before the development of modern medicine and information technology that goes with it.
Talking of IT as well, like with the NHS apps, some might be concerned about data security. Is there a risk with passports like this?
There is a risk with any kind of information technology that data security will be breached. With what effects, I don't know, because it depends what data disappear, where they go and what they might be used for. But of course, we don't want there to be any data breaches, and that means that there will have to be considerable effort and resources devoted to trying to ensure that that doesn't happen.
Indeed. Surely, though, we can't refuse people entry to somewhere just because they haven't been vaccinated. I mean, shouldn't this be up to more individual businesses to decide their approach?
That may well be true, in fact, and there may be no benefits from refusing people entry in any case if there, for example, inside a building is adequate social distancing and adequate disinfection and so on. It may actually make little difference. Now, that is something we could do a bit of research on when vaccines are available as to whether areas with a high rate of vaccination actually have less risk of contamination than those with a low rate of vaccination, if in fact that were the way things panned out.
And finally, David, very briefly, if you don't mind, could the idea of having COVID passes be viewed as too much state interference?
I think we need a deal of state interference when we've got this horrible disease, this beast of a disease that we really have to get under control. And unfortunately, restrictive measures get the numbers down, as we're seeing here at the end, as it might be, or at least the downward curve of the second wave. But unfortunately, if we then simply relax absolutely everything without a vaccine and without measures over Christmas, then we will almost certainly have a third wave, and it will probably be gruesome.
Number one, I don't think we're going to eradicate coronavirus ever. I think it's going to be with humankind forever. Secondly, I think we may get to a point where coronavirus becomes a seasonal problem. I don't want to draw too many parallels with flu, but possibly that is the kind of way we would learn to live with it. And the third point is, do I think there will come a big moment where we kind of, have a massive party and throw on masks and hand sanitizer and say, that's it, it's behind us, like the end of the war? No, I don't. I think those kind of habits that we've learnt from that clearly stop the spread of other respiratory viruses, such as flu, will perhaps persist for many years. And that may be a good thing if they do.
Yes, it may be a good thing. Or on the other hand, we may want to get back to life as pretty much as close to normal. But anyway, I have high hopes that eventually the vaccine will make a very, very significant difference to the way we live our lives.
So, Harry, I'd like to come back because I do like to be challenged when I have perhaps not made myself clear, and the Prime Minister has picked me up on this occasion, and it's quite all right in public.
I didn't mean to challenge you.
No, but it's quite all right because it gives me a chance to clarify what I mean here. I do not think the government will continue to have to recommend social distancing, masks and hand sanitizer forever and a day. I hope we will get back to a much more normal world. But the point I was trying to make was, do I think possibly some of those personal habits for some people will persist longer and perhaps become enduring for some people? Yes, I think that's possible.
As in the Far East?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, who knows? Who knows? Thank you very much, everybody. That concludes the session for today. Thanks, Harry.
The United States of America could be the first country to start inoculating its citizens. It had ordered at least 800 million doses and plans to roll out the first shots well before Christmas. The preparations have already started. Cold storages are being prepared. Vaccine doses are ready to be flown to different parts of America, all in the anticipation of the first round of approvals. 2 vaccine candidates have submitted approvals. The first one is the Pfizer shot. The second is from Moderna. Both companies are waiting for a nod from the Food and Drug Administration, the drug regulator from America. Here's what we know about America's vaccine rollout. Reportedly, 6.4 million doses are ready to be dispatched. Both companies have kept some doses ready. The decision on the Pfizer shot is expected around the 10th of December. The regulators could take a couple of more days to make their decision. While the Moderna shot is expected to undergo FDA review on the 17th of December, both of these vaccines are quite similar. They are about 95% effective. They are administered in 2 doses. Each company expects to have about 20 million doses ready to distribute in America by the end of this year. The rollout will be on expected lines. Healthcare workers first, followed by the most vulnerable citizens. These could be people with chronic diseases, care home residents, even police officers, teachers, bus drivers could be given the shot. So if you are watching us from America, if you are healthy and below 50 years of age, you will probably be last in line to get the vaccine. Moderna is the latest player to submit its vaccine candidate for approval. The company says its shot is more than 94% effective and 100% effective in avoiding serious infection. Those numbers are promising. What about the side effects? Moderna CEO says there are minor side effects, but the vaccine does not pose a threat to life.
For the safety side effect, it's very typical to what we described 2 weeks ago, or what you see in approved vaccine. You have local, site injection pain, a bit of redness for some people that goes away. It's self-resolving within 24 to 48 hours. Those are for local side effects. And then for systemic side effects, you see some people have a bit of headache, some people have a bit of fever, some people have chills. Usually, again, within 24 to 48 hours, self-resolving without even taking an aspirin.
And so the vaccine makers are ready. What about the government? Officials in Washington say they are in a position to supply vaccines within 24 hours of approvals.
We at the FDA announced an advisory committee for December the 10th, and if everything is on track, everything proves out what it appears to be, we could be looking at approval within days after that. Moderna is basically 1 week behind that. And General Perna has said from Operation Warp Speed that we'll ship within 24 hours of FDA authorization. So we could be seeing both of these vaccines out and getting into people's arms before Christmas.
Now, this is a major step towards defeating the Wuhan virus. If America gives the go-ahead to its vaccines, it could prompt other countries to approve the same vaccines too. The world will have learnings to take from America's vaccine rollout. As other world leaders gear up for their own vaccine rollout, we will be keeping a close eye on these developments.
So that's what you missed. Oh, and one other thing. The country's public health establishment has tortured your children for 8 months for no apparent reason. That happened. That story has not received a lot of coverage, but it's been confirmed tonight. The authorities have admitted it. 60 million American children languishing in their rooms since spring, sitting in front of screens, learning nothing, isolated from human contact, in many cases driven to mental illness. We can now report there was no reason for any of that. The experts were wrong. They had no idea what they were doing. But the most amazing part, and this really is the headline of the story, is that they knew they were wrong when they did it, but they kept lying about it even as American children began to kill themselves. On Sunday in New York, city officials all but admitted this. They announced they're reopening elementary schools. Those are the same schools that they closed fewer than 2 weeks ago. Now, from a medical standpoint, nothing has changed. New York didn't get an early shipment of the Pfizer vaccine. There wasn't some groundbreaking new research paper that revolutionized our understanding of the coronavirus. Nothing like that at all. In fact, parents simply had enough. And they forced Bill de Blasio to admit the obvious. This virus is not a threat to children. As de Blasio put it in that weird euphemistic way that dumb people speak, quote, "We know that the health realities for the youngest kids are the most favorable." Well, yes, we do know that. We've known it for a long time. We knew it when Bill de Blasio shut down New York schools. And Tony Fauci knew it too, though he didn't say anything about it. Now he's decided to say something about it, 8 months late. Here's Anthony Fauci on Sunday. And as you watch this, keep in mind that this man on the screen is leading our response, America's response, to the coronavirus.
Close the bars and keep the schools open is what we really say. Obviously, you don't have one size fits all, but as I said in the past, and as you accurately quoted me, the default position should be to try as best as possible within reason to keep the children in school or to get them back to school. If you look at the data, the spread among children and from children is not really very big at all, not like one would have suspected.
Oh, I've always said you should keep the schools open, says the man in charge of America's coronavirus response to a nation whose schools have been closed for months. Right, yeah, I always said that. Check the tape. Because, quote, if you look at the data, says Anthony Fauci. But wait a second. Why is this just now occurring to Tony Fauci? Isn't this Fauci's entire job to, quote, look at the data? Yes, it is. And yet somehow he never thought to do that. That's our corona czar. Over the summer, when the data looked the same as they do tonight, Fauci explained that he couldn't really say if kids should be allowed to go to school. It was, quote, complicated. Except it wasn't complicated. It wasn't complicated then. It's not complicated now. In April, many months ago, a study by the Journal of the American Medical Association found that school-aged children who get the coronavirus, quote, develop only mild symptoms and typically recover within 2 weeks. Months later, same story. In June, a study in The Lancet affirmed this, quote, COVID-19 is generally a mild disease in children, including in infants. Other studies found the exact same thing. No study has found anything but that. There was never much question about it. But if you're looking for more evidence, check the death rates. Those are publicly available. Deaths are not hard to track. Consider the state of New Jersey. That's one of the states hit hardest by the coronavirus. So far, in New Jersey, not a single school-aged child has died from the coronavirus. Not one. Many children have died from car accidents and fires and drug ODs and suicide. None have died from COVID-19. In California, the biggest state in the United States, 40 million people live there. A total of 2 people under the age of 18 have died from the coronavirus. 2. The numbers nationwide, according to the latest CDC numbers, 123 Americans under the age of 18 have died from the coronavirus. 123 out of 350 million. We shut the schools anyway, crushing millions of kids, affecting their futures in ways we can't even understand at this point, but it's clear it's bad. Really bad in some cases. So the question is, why did we do this? And the answer is to save the teachers. The teachers' unions pushed this, and their servants in the Democratic Party obeyed. They're the single largest donors to the Democratic Party, so of course they did. So unionized teachers get to stay home collecting checks for their 9-month-a-year jobs because classrooms are just too dangerous. It's like the Battle of the Bulge 5 days a week. And that's exactly what they've done. But what do the data say about this? Well, for teachers under the age of 50, and that's the vast majority of them, the odds of surviving a coronavirus infection are roughly 99.98%. But we should tell you that for teachers under 70, the risk of dying escalates to a terrifying 99.5% chance of survival. And by the way, if teachers do get sick, it likely won't be from teaching. Children appear not to spread the coronavirus, certainly not effectively. We've known this for a long time. Back in May, researchers in Europe found, quote, children do not appear to be drivers of transmission, and we argue that reopening schools should be considered safe, accompanied by certain measures. Again, none of this is new. Tony Fauci, the data guy, knew it at the time. And so did anyone in the news media who could read, which is still most of them. And yet they kept lying about it, all of them. In July, here's just one example, a panel of physicians and experts on infectious disease went on television to explain that going to school isn't dangerous for anyone. They would send their own kids. Watch the news anchor's reaction.
Would you let your kids go back to school?
I will. My kids are looking forward to it.
Yes. Period. Absolutely.
Absolutely. As much as I can.
Without a hesitation.
Without a hesitation, yes.
I have no concerns about sending my child to school in the fall.
I would let my kids go back to school.
Dr. John Torres, NBC News.
They all said yes.
They all said yes, said the newsreader, feigning shock. Can you believe that? Doctors have concluded their own children should go to school. They must be crazy. They're crazy. What do the doctors know about coronavirus? What was this about? And of course, you know the answer. It was about Donald Trump. Donald Trump, in this case, agreed with the doctors. Therefore, the doctors had to be mocked and ignored. Here's what the president said about schools in July.
We have to open our schools. Open our schools. Stop this nonsense. We open our schools.
Stop this nonsense. We reopen our schools. Now, in point of fact, as a scientific matter, that turned out to be sound policy based on sound data. But the media told us the exact opposite of that. One headline at CNN warned of, quote, the very clear dangers of Donald Trump's push to reopen schools. Google didn't censor that as misinformation. It should have. Another headline called out, quote, Donald Trump's mind-bending logic on school reopenings. Mind-bending logic. Those damn data again. Joe Biden's campaign didn't want to hear it. They didn't want you to hear it either. School was dangerous. Period. Donald Trump claimed the opposite. Therefore, it was too dangerous to send your kids or for you to decide to send them. Watch.
Ignoring how the virus spreads, risking teachers and parents' lives, going against the advice of experts.
It's had very little impact on young people.
Do you trust him to do what's best for our children? Because this is not a test.
Yeah, going against the advice of experts. In this country, that's no longer allowed, even and maybe especially when the experts are completely wrong. What's the message? The message couldn't be clearer. They're not your kids anymore. If they were your kids, you could make the key decisions about their lives, but they're not. Those kids, your former kids, belong to Tony Fauci now. Tony Fauci, America's parent. He'll make the decisions about your kids, thank you very much, in conjunction with the nation's Ubermom, who, by the way, is also 80 years old, Mrs. Nancy D. Pelosi. Watch Mrs. Pelosi fret about the health of our children.
Are you confident that students and teachers will go back safely to school in the fall?
No, I think what we heard from the secretary was malfeasance and dereliction of duty. This is appalling. They're messing. They're messing. The president and his administration are messing with the health of our children. Going back to school presents the biggest risk for the spread of the coronavirus.
If that's not criminal, what she just said, we may need to redefine what it means to commit a crime. 60 million school-aged children affected by a decision that was wrong, and many of them hurt for life. But we just blow right past it and allow political leaders like that to blow right past it with phrases like the health of our children. What happens when you lock children in their rooms in front of screens and prevent them from experiencing human contact? Has Nancy Pelosi ever been asked that question? Has she ever wondered about the answer? According to the Centers for Disease Control, a total of 522 children between the ages of 5 and 14 died of suicide in 2017. In that same age group, only 42 children have died from the coronavirus so far this year. What are those suicide numbers going to look like if we continue to take Nancy Pelosi's advice about the health of our children? We already have some indications of that. Future years will reveal the whole picture, and you can be certain it'll be horrifying. But for right now, with incomplete data, here's what we know. In St. Paul, Minnesota, for example, 40% of all grades given this year have been Fs. And you can be certain they're grading lightly, but it's still double the normal amount of failures. In Fairfax County, Virginia, the number of middle and high school students with failing grades in 2 or more classes has increased by 83%. The number of students with disabilities who are failing 2 or more classes has increased by more than 100%. In a lot of school districts, huge numbers of kids never even registered for online classes. Do you have kids? Do you know anyone who does? They're learning nothing. Those are real consequences. If you want to know the health of a society, look at its young people, look at its schools. These are obvious points that are being roundly ignored, and anyone who makes them is attacked for making them. We're going to look back on this moment in shame. Back in June, we interviewed Dr. Scott Atlas. He was then a member of the White House's coronavirus task force. He was one of the very few people, then or now, brave enough to make a simple point. Here's what he said.
But the point about the schools is really critical because this is the most irrational public policy probably in modern history. Children have virtually zero risk of getting a serious complication, virtually zero risk of dying. You don't lock down the children because you are personally afraid. It's totally outrageous.
Dr. Scott Atlas was attacked as a monster for saying that, really attacked. Dr. Tony Fauci, by contrast, was deified. Signs throughout Northwest D.C. said, "I believe Dr. Fauci." But the truth is that Scott Atlas was right, and Dr. Fauci was revealed as a power-mad incompetent. That's not our opinion, by the way. The data prove it.
Let's get the thoughts on the new vaccine rolled out, we're told, as of Monday in this country. Let's get the thoughts of Dr. Mike Yeadon. He's a former chief scientific advisor for Pfizer, and we've spoken to him many times over the show, many times on Talk Radio, about concerns about testing and about, what I suppose what a lot of people say, what's really going on behind the scenes when it comes to the scientific and medical management of the coronavirus virus. Good morning to you, Mike.
Good morning, Julia.
Good to talk to you. Now, you've raised a lot of concerns about testing, which is very much your area of expertise from your many, many years working at companies like Pfizer and setting up your own company involving with testing and lab work and the like. What are your thoughts on the rollout of this vaccine? Because there are an awful lot of people who've got concerns about the testing and concerns about government policy who are raising what a lot of people would regard as conspiracy theories about how, this vaccine, it's all about making money, it's not going to do anything good, it's about controlling us or the like. Do you sign up to any of those conspiracy theories?
No, I don't. So, Julia, first, thank you for having me again. First, I was the chief scientific advisor for respiratory at Pfizer. I would love to be. Anyway, so first I will say, because I'm going to say some things that aren't popular, I'm going to make it clear I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I've spent my entire working life in the pharmaceutical industry, and including to today, where I advise biotech clients. I've had all the vaccines myself, so has my wife, so did our children when they were small, and as evidence that I stay current and believe in well-developed vaccines that meet a medical need, when my children who are now in their 20s, when they were in their teens and the most recent HPV vaccine arrived, I looked at the data, talked it through with my children, and advised them to make their own decision. So I'm pro-vaccine if it's developed well and meets a medical need. So where am I on this vaccine then? I would say, and this comes from experience not of vaccine development, which I don't have, but 32 years in drug development, R&D. So safety is the most important factor. You can't compromise on that. The next is how well does the new medicine work? And when you've understood both those, the safety as it were as a risk, the effectiveness, the benefit, you can look at risk-benefit. And even that ratio will change depending on the unmet medical need, the amount of benefits that you're going to get, not just effectiveness, but is the person suffering from the condition you're going to treat them? So I would say I do have a concern because in the main, young, healthy people they're not likely to get severely ill or to die with this virus. Now, some people do. There were clearly some cases in the spring, but certainly looking in the autumn now, it does seem to be back to the elderly and already ill that are most at risk. And so I would want to see it offered to those people. And I'm very concerned about a wide rollout for this reason, that we don't yet know enough about the long-term safety. That's not controversial. We've just not been in people very long. And perhaps a bit more controversial, I don't think we know much about the effectiveness, because the trial has only studied whether or not people became PCR positive. And people will know I have concerns about that. And I think they're valid. They haven't looked at full-length viral sequencing or cultures. So we've just got PCR positive or not. I do think the vaccine has done something to that endpoint. I don't think we can be clear that that will lead to reductions in severe illness or death.
Although I think they have claimed that that is what they're looking at. Now, again, we're told this vaccine and other vaccines 90% plus effectiveness, even in people of the older age category who are most at risk. So am I right in thinking your argument is that, look, yeah, people should, the vaccine is definitely good for people who are the older age categories, people in their 90s, their 80s, their 70s, possibly even their 60s, people who are at higher risk, those who are vulnerable, but that you don't think there should be a mass rollout vaccination campaign for everybody else who is at, we've seen the statistics, at much, much, much lower risk of dying.
Yes, you've summarised it very well, but I would just come back to you said, you invited me to agree that it's very effective in this older group. I would say we don't know that yet. I do accept, and Pfizer has said that is their intention, but the basis of approval of the drug, we've not yet seen all the information, the basis of approval by MHRA yesterday, presumably, was on the basis of reduction in becoming PCR positive, that is, as a surrogate for infection. So they don't even have solid data that it reduces infection. I think it will do that, but will it reduce severe illness and death? I don't think anyone can say.
And it's going to be really crucial that we do see the evidence on which the MHRA, this is the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, the basis on which they've made that decision, so that people, that's just good practice, isn't it? That everyone can be reassured.
It should be released. Normally, I don't know if it's true, uses this phrase, but they usually have an SBA. It's the summary basis of approval, and it can be written quickly because it's a summary. So I would want to see the vaccine equivalent of an SBA this week, please. It's really quick to do. You can tell us what was the basis. Please do that.
Are you concerned at all about the talk of this idea of a COVID passport certificate? So you get your vaccine, you've got a certificate, and then that will, allow you. Qantas Airlines have already said you're not going to get on one of their planes next year without a vaccine certificate. I'm thinking, well, I won't be using Qantas then. Thank you very much. But you wouldn't be able to go to a sports stadium, wouldn't be able to go into certain restaurants. Private businesses would be allowed to say, I need to see effectively your health records before I allow you access to my business. What do you make of that? And even some people talking about how this needs to be a mandatory vaccine.
I know. Well, certainly mandatory is extremely problematic. I hope that listeners know or watchers know that because of some very unpleasant things that happened in the Second World War, all the countries of the world decided after that they would put in place a convention that said that the human body is sacrosanct and that no one shall perform a medical procedure on it without the consent of that person. Obviously, there are some exceptions, people who don't have agency or capacity. But for the rest of us, it's simply illegal under international law to which we are a signatory to go to mandate. And that's also true of coercion. So I would advise the government to persuade people to take it on the evidence. So if you provide the evidence that this is good for you, you'll take it. That's as far as we should go. And where it comes to vaccine certificates and things, I'm worried about that because I think it will become coercion. And also, why don't we just be sensible about this? It's a nasty vaccine, a nasty virus. It definitely has killed a lot of people, and it still represents a threat if you catch it and you're not immune. But it's a worse version of flu in most people who are old, and a less severe risk for those who are much younger. I don't understand why we're getting quite so hyperventilatory about this, but that's politics, not science.
Yeah,
I'm uncomfortable
but that's it.
Yeah.
But the politics and science have become very intertwined, haven't they?
They
Because with this
They
idea,
have.
a lot of people seem to be caught up with this idea that you could go to zero COVID, you never have a single death. People saying one death is too many. Well, it's seeming not to realise that 1,700 people die of various things every year. And we are seeing, are we not, in the data right now that we've basically had a complete collapse of flu deaths. Now, this may be due to the fact that people are self-isolating, people are social distancing, we've been in lockdown. But a lot of people think actually, lots of experts think that it may well actually be that people are catching the dominant virus going around, which would be coronavirus, not flu.
No.
But also that a lot of the deaths right now may actually be called COVID deaths, and we have to be very careful about what those deaths are registered. They are deaths that are registered involved. The technical thing is they involve COVID. So we are seeing, when we see these death numbers every day on the news, they are for deaths that have been registered where someone has died with COVID, not necessarily of COVID.
Yes. No, I can comment on that. So people who are followers of my good colleague, Dr. Claire Craig, who was a diagnostic pathologist. So she's done all the work that I'm going to mention. So yes, I don't want to put words in her mouth in case I get it wrong, but it's certainly true that there is over assignment of deaths to COVID. So not all of the people who have got a COVID death, that is, they died within 28 days of a positive PCR test. Not all of those people died because of the virus or even with it. Sometimes they'll be false positives and so on. But I just want to make a quick comment. You've said I talk about testing, I do, but my training also includes immunology, and we seem to have forgotten immunology. I'm convinced, and I hope I can do it in 3 or 4 sentences, that to say the country's broadly at herd immunity. So there's been extensive papers published to show that people had prior immunity because their bodies had seen a related virus, the common cold causing coronaviruses. That's not controversial, even Public Health England has now published on that front. I believe we're at herd immunity as evidenced by the lack of COVID deaths in London right now, which were about 200 to 250 every day. 7 months ago, I checked 3 days ago, it was 9. So that means it's 95, 96% lower. Now, there are some areas that were hit hard in the spring and are still being hit hard, and it's Liverpool. But a friend of mine, Joel Smalley, has looked at this, and it's the same pattern. There are districts and regions in the northwest that contributed the deaths in spring, regions A, B, and C. I don't remember their names. But in the autumn, it's not A, B, and C. All the deaths come from D, E, and F. So I think there's strong evidence of herd immunity. I advise people to go and look at that. The reason this is important is not that we don't need a vaccine, but it means there's a weaker case still for, as it were, trying to throw ourselves in front of the train by using a vaccine, that's the only thing that'll stop it. I think it's mostly self-limiting and definitely still people catching it and dying, and mostly the elderly and ill. I would want to see them offered the vaccine first, and I think we should just take a step back and not be so, frankly, so hasty, because it's risky.
Okay, I really appreciate you joining us, Dr. Mike Yeadon, former Chief Scientific Advisor with Pfizer. I know people are being very eagle-eared and eagle-eyed when we have guests like Mike Yeadon on, putting alternative points of view. But again, an awful lot of the things that he says, it's amazing how often, a few months down the line, the likes of Public Health England and others do accept, including the item about T-cell immunity, which he was talking about there. But again, we're saying that actually this is a vaccine that should be rolled out to those who are most vulnerable to the virus, but perhaps not necessarily hastily rolled out to those who are not most vulnerable. That would be those of us under 60 who do not have underlying health concerns. That his point of view. We put the points of view of many different experts on the show. We're not afraid of debate here at Talk Radio, as you'll know.
Should MPs tomorrow vote against 99% of the country being plunged into Tiers 2 and Tiers 3? Great to speak now to Anne Widdecombe. She is the former Conservative government minister. Anne, if you were back in government, would you cross the floor? Would you vote against your own party tomorrow in the name of civil liberties and what's right?
I would certainly be voting against the proposed measures, yes.
Why?
Not just in the name of civil liberties, as you put it, but rather more importantly, because I think this has been mishandled from the start. And I mean, the recent developments are unbelievable. We've been in lockdown. We're told we're coming out. If you're in Tier 3, you might as well, frankly, be staying in. And not only that, but all the rules have changed. So, you know, we had, for the sake of clarity, as Boris actually had the gall to say, Tiers 1, 2, and 3, and here were a set of rules which went with each one. And no sooner had anybody absorbed that than all the rules changed.
I know. And the rules are becoming increasingly ridiculous. So today we have a member of SAGE saying you can't spend any more than 15 minutes inside a shop. Then you have the government minister, George Eustace, the Environment Secretary, saying a Scotch egg counts as a substantial meal. But who decides what counts as a substantial meal? And what if you order one Scotch egg, you can have 10 pints? I mean, when are we going to start trusting the British public to use our common sense? Because you know what, Anne? Most of us have that.
I agree. And I mean, you've asked the question that I've been asking throughout, which is, you know, when on earth will they let us make our own judgments? I mean, they're making the rules up as they go along. They talk about a substantial meal, then suddenly they're obliged to define it. So they decide, well, a Scotch egg will do. I mean, you couldn't make it up. You really couldn't. And it's what happens when you start trying to over-define things. I mean, right at the start, the guidance was, you know, keep your distance socially. Don't mix at all if you think that you have any chance of having this thing. Take certain sensible precautions. That was what started. And then, as they tried to prescribe what we had to do, it got ever more ridiculous. I mean, certainly I'd be voting against it tomorrow.
And then, Anne, we head to Wales, where, remember, a few weeks ago we were told the circuit breaker lockdown, as they called it, was going to make all of the difference. It was incredibly draconian. They shut down the entire country. Didn't make a blind bit of difference, Anne. So now Mark Drakeford, who runs the Labour government in Wales, has decided that prohibition is going to somehow control coronavirus. He's banned the sale of alcohol and he's shutting down the entire hospitality industry after 6 p.m. Has he just made this up?
Yes. I mean, basically, what is happening is that all politicians, all of them, are covering themselves. They're terrified that at the end of this, they're going to be found wanting, or they're going to be sued, they're going to be blamed for individual deaths. And so they're always being seen to do something else. They've got to be seen to be doing something. So having done one thing and that having not worked, they then have to do something else. That's what this is actually all about. That's what it's about. It's about being seen to be doing something at the bar of public opinion. That's what it's about.
How brave does a Tory MP have to be, though, Anne, tomorrow to rebel against the government? Because remember, they're being threatened, especially the young ones, are being threatened with their career. If you vote against us, you will not be promoted. Wave goodbye to a cabinet career. How difficult is it if you're an MP in that situation? I don't have much sympathy because I think people should do what's right, but I'm trying to just understand the psychology because you've been there.
Oh, I have been there and I have been in that position. I did once when I was a very new backbencher, only a couple of years in. And I not only voted against the government, I actually led a rebellion against the government at the time about the level of support they were giving to people in old folks' homes. And I was told there and then, you know, we won, we defeated the government, and I was told, that's it, your career is over. 6 months later, I was a PPS. 7 months later, I was a minister.
So ignore it, basically.
Ignore
they
it.
Don't mean it.
He hasn't got that big enough a pool of talent to take that sort of line.
Now we discover that a vaccination may be a passport to the acquisition of your civil liberties, and without which you will have all sorts of things that you would be able to do denied to you. Can I say that that would be absolutely disproportionate to a virus with a mortality rate of verging on 1%? It would equally be a terrible precedent to set for other vaccines and medicines. So I hope that we can get away from that. The way to persuade people to have a vaccine is, of course, to line up the entire government and its ministers and their loved ones and let them take it first, and then get all the lovies, the icons of popular culture, out on the airwaves singing its praises. To have any kind of suggestion of coercion absolutely feeds the conspiracy theory that we are being cowed and our liberties being taken away. Very
I'm extremely grateful to him for giving way. Will he agree with me that it's not enough for the government merely to refrain from coercing people? The government's also got to pay attention to implicit coercion. That is, if the government turns a blind eye to allowing businesses like airlines and restaurants to refuse to let people in unless they've had the vaccination, the government's got to decide whether it's willing to allow people to discriminate on that basis.
Discrimination. It would be vaccinationism, which we must, of course, resist. The other thing that any kind of coercion would do would be to set the seal on this government's reputation as the most authoritarian since the Commonwealth of the 1650s. But it is as nothing to the enthusiasm that we've seen from the front bench opposite for even more coercive and restrictive measures.
You've rightly said that you have suffered enormously for speaking out, for speaking your truth, and you've lost your house, you've been cancelled. This is the thing that the left are now doing, this cancel culture. You've been off Twitter, on in this magazine, off that radio station. Tell us what it's like to be persecuted in this way.
Well, first up, I accept everything that comes my way. So I put myself out here. I have to suck it up. If I don't like it, then I can go home, I can sit on my sofa and I can be quiet. So toughness for me. You know, I've just got to suck this up. But as a result of speaking out about the truths of my country, I have been arrested and interviewed under caution because of a column in a newspaper. I have been arrested and challenged because I made the point that Pakistani grooming gangs are made up of majority Pakistani Muslim men. I was arrested for that. I have lost every job I ever had. I was a columnist, successful columnist, most read columnist at Mail Online for 2 years, lost that job, lost my radio show, and then they came for my house. They made a new law just for me. How lucky I am that said I can cause you serious harm if you perceive that I have caused you serious harm, and you don't need to prove it. And to isolate myself from all of the attacks, I have sold everything. I own nothing, and I have nothing. And that, in a way, has been very freeing. In order for me to obtain my freedom of speech, I have given up everything. And that's a very willing, that's a sacrifice I'm being very willing to make, because I'm so proud and pleased and delighted to have such strong supporters and followers, and I really thank the people that keep me going, because they really matter. They are the light that guides the way, and I think people like me are needed, because the more of us that have the moral courage to stand up and speak the truth of our countries, it helps to just push back the walls for a little bit longer and make other people feel that they're not alone, because the truth of your audience is that it is lonely. People are lonely out there because they feel that no one else shares their opinion, or they can't get to people that feel the same way. And I think these days, at these times, people are lonelier than they've ever been in their lifetime or at any time in history. And I'm here really to tell people you're not alone. There's many of us. We're a silent army, but we're a strong one. And anytime you need me, I'm right here for you at KT Hopkins, capital K, capital T Hopkins.
Katie Hopkins, thanks so much for coming on today. Absolute privilege and pleasure to have you on. You will have given a lot of people a lot to think about, and I hope we see you again. And keep up a great fight.
Thank you very much.
So many people are supporting you and behind you. Thank you, Katie Hopkins.
Thank you.
Yet any time you and I question the schemes of the do-gooders, we're denounced as being against their humanitarian goals. They say we're always against things, we're never for anything. Well, the trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant, it's just that they know so much that isn't so. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves. You and I are told increasingly we have to choose between a left or right. Well, I'd like to suggest there is no such thing as a left or right. There's only an up or down. Man's old age dream, the ultimate in individual freedom consistent with law and order, or down to the ant-heap of totalitarianism. And regardless of their sincerity, their humanitarian motives, those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. In this vote harvesting time, they use terms like the Great Society, or as we were told a few days ago by the President, we must accept a greater government activity in the affairs of the people. But they've been a little more explicit in the past, and among themselves, and all of the things I now will quote have appeared in print. These are not Republican accusations. For example, they have voices that say the Cold War will end through our acceptance of a not undemocratic socialism. Another voice says the profit motive has become outmoded. It must be replaced by the incentives of the welfare state. Or our traditional system of individual freedom is incapable of solving the complex problems of the 20th century. Senator Fulbright has said at Stanford University that the Constitution is outmoded. He referred to the President as our moral teacher and our leader, and he says he is hobbled in his task by the restrictions of power imposed on him by this antiquated document. He must be freed so that he can do for us what he knows is best. And Senator Clark of Pennsylvania, another articulate spokesman, defines liberalism as meeting the material needs of the masses through the full power of centralized government. Well, I, for one, resent it when a representative of the people refers to you and me, the free men and women of this country, as the masses. This is a term we haven't applied to ourselves in America. But beyond that, the full power of centralized government, this was the very thing the Founding Fathers sought to minimize. They knew that governments don't control things. A government can't control the economy without controlling people. And they know when a government sets out to do that, it must use force and coercion to achieve its purpose. They also knew, those Founding Fathers, that outside of its legitimate functions, government does nothing as well or as economically as the private sector of the economy. Trouble. And that is the issue of this campaign that makes all the other problems I've discussed academic, unless we realize we're in a war that must be won. Those who would trade our freedom for the soup kitchen of the welfare state have told us they have a utopian solution of peace without victory. They call their policy accommodation. And they say if we'll only avoid any direct confrontation with the enemy, he'll forget his evil ways and learn to love us. All who oppose them are indicted as warmongers. They say we offer simple answers to complex problems. Well, perhaps there is a simple answer. Not an easy answer, but simple. If you and I have the courage to tell our elected officials that we want our national policy based on what we know in our hearts is morally right, we cannot buy our security, our freedom from the threat of the bomb, by committing an immorality so great as saying to 1 billion human beings now enslaved behind the Iron Curtain, give up your dreams of freedom, because to save our own skins, we're willing to make a deal with your slave masters. Alexander Hamilton said, a nation which can prefer disgrace to danger is prepared for a master and deserves one. Now let's set the record straight. There's no argument over the choice between peace and war, but there's only one guaranteed way you can have peace, and you can have it in the next second: surrender. Admittedly, there's a risk in any course we follow other than this, but every lesson of history tells us that the greater risk lies in appeasement. And this is the specter our well-meaning liberal friends refuse to face, that their policy of accommodation is appeasement. And it gives no choice between peace and war, only between fight or surrender. If we continue to accommodate, continue to back and retreat, eventually we have to face the final demand, the ultimatum. And what then? Well, Nikita Khrushchev has told his people he knows what our answer will be. He has told them that we're retreating under the pressure of the Cold War, and someday, when the time comes to deliver the final ultimatum, our surrender will be voluntary, because by that time, we will have been weakened from within spiritually, morally, and economically. He believes this because from our side he's heard voices pleading for peace at any price, or better read than dead. Or as one commentator put it, he'd rather live on his knees than die on his feet. And therein lies the road to war, because those voices don't speak for the rest of us. You and I know and do not believe that life is so dear and peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery. If nothing in life is worth dying for, when did this begin? Just in the face of this enemy? Or should Moses have told the children of Israel to live in slavery under the Pharaohs? Should Christ have refused the cross? Should the patriots at Concord Bridge have thrown down their guns and refused to fire the shot heard round the world? The martyrs of history were not fools. And our honored dead, who gave their lives to stop the advance of the Nazis, didn't die in vain. Where then is the road to peace? Well, it's a simple answer after all. You and I have the courage to say to our enemies, there is a price we will not pay. There is a point beyond which they must not advance. This is the meaning, in the phrase of Barry Goldwater, peace through strength. Winston Churchill said the destiny of man is not measured by material computations. When great forces are on the move in the world, we learn we're spirits, not animals. And he said there's something going on in time and space and beyond time and space, which, whether we like it or not, spells duty.